Sweet Revenge, Episode Number 1. I ruined a man's life. This happened about 4 years ago, but only recently did I find out how part of my revenge plan actually worked out. And that's what pushed me to finally tell this story. I have never shared it with anyone before. My mom has been best friends with a woman, let's call her Eileen, since childhood. To me, she was like an aunt. About 5 years ago, after more than 25 years of marriage, her husband suddenly asked for a divorce. Eileen was living about 6 hours away from my mom at the time, and I was in a different state, so I didn't learn how everything truly went down until several months after the divorce was finalized. After the separation, her life started to fall apart. She became depressed and developed a drinking problem. My mom and Eileen's childhood friends convinced her to move back to her hometown and then to go to rehab. Shortly before she left for treatment, I moved back to the area and took care of her apartment and paperwork while she was in the facility. During my first visit to her in rehab, Eileen told me her version of the divorce. Her ex-husband, let's call him Jeff, had never talked about any problems before. One day, he simply announced that he wanted to leave. Eileen believed he had just fallen out of love. Right away, something about that didn't sit right with me. Jeff had been an executive at a pharmaceutical company and earned a very high salary. A year before the divorce, he suddenly lost his job and decided to take a career break. That didn't match the man who had always been a total workaholic. Eileen hadn't worked for years because of a disability, but she owned property and had a trust fund from her parents. So while Jeff was unemployed, they lived mostly off her money. After Jeff asked for the divorce, he refused therapy and any real discussion. He kept saying they had grown apart and that he was tired of being with a woman like Eileen. He struck at the exact insecurities she had struggled with her entire life. He repeated the same things her mother had always told her, that she wasn't good enough, not pretty enough, not smart enough, that she should be grateful anyone like him had ever stayed with her. He knew exactly where her weakest points were and used them without mercy. Right after the divorce was finalized, Jeff moved to another state, to a place where he had no family and no connections. That was another thing that didn't make sense to me. I didn't say anything to Eileen, but I was almost certain Jeff had been having an affair, had deliberately arranged his job loss to avoid paying alimony, and had then moved to be with his mistress. I just didn't have proof at the time. Eileen asked me to look for a box of Jeff's belongings that she had agreed to store for him until he got settled in his new place. She said all the information was in an email and gave me the password to her computer. That's when I saw that Jeff's email account was still configured on the same computer. After reading just a few messages from before the divorce, I knew something was very wrong. The same woman's name kept appearing, a mistress. Not a one-time mistake. Something that had been going on for years. There were also transfer confirmations, money moving between accounts, and strange financial notes. Jeff had stopped actively using that email address about 3 years earlier, roughly a year before the divorce. In the receipts folder, I found a registration email from a dating site and a confirmation for a brand new email address. The laptop also had saved passwords. That gave me access to his dating account and his new email inbox. That's where everything came out. I read messages between Jeff and another woman from before the divorce. She was his current partner. On Facebook, I found her profile. There were photos of her with Jeff and pictures from the construction of their new home. That didn't make sense because according to Eileen, Jeff had no money after the divorce. At the time, I was studying law and had access to public records databases. I checked the land where the house was being built. It had been purchased several months before the divorce filing. No mortgage. Later, Jeff's name appeared as a co-owner. That meant only one thing. The money had been hidden before the divorce. In his new email, I also found confirmation that Jeff had quit his job voluntarily, not been fired as he had told Eileen. There were emails about his final paycheck, a farewell gathering, and the handover of duties. Emails about his boat, which had a serious leak near the engine. Correspondence with the boat broker, clearly showing he was trying to sell it quickly. An inspection report that made no mention of the leak or potential damage. Detailed plans for the new house, including project changes, cost estimates, and upgrades. confirmation of his marriage to the new woman very soon after the divorce, a shared calendar showing they were seeing each other while he was still married, flirtatious emails with yet another woman after his new marriage, and full details about his new job, position, and workplace. I downloaded everything and started putting together my plan. First, the boat. I sent the buyers all the emails about the leak. A few months later, I checked the court records. The buyers had sued Jeff, the broker, and the inspector. Then the house. I filed a complaint with the county about a workshop next to the garage that didn't match the approved building plans. It turned out to be illegal. Jeff was fined, and part of the structure had to be demolished. Construction was delayed. That left the wife. I sent her an anonymous email about a possible affair between Jeff and another woman, citing specific dates from the shared calendar. It turned out the woman Jeff had been emailing was his assistant at his new job. More importantly, his new boss was his new wife's brother. Jeff and his wife had moved to her hometown so she could be close to her family, and so Jeff could work for his brother-in-law. To this day, I don't know if Jeff was truly having an affair at that point. He denied it, but it didn't really matter anymore. His wife didn't believe him. After all, she herself had entered that relationship when Jeff had still been married. Trust in that marriage had been fragile from the start. A few days later, she filed for divorce. Her brother, who was also Jeff's boss, fired him. Their new house was still under construction. After the divorce, there was no way to finish it. The property had to be sold as an unfinished investment. Jeff lost a huge amount of money. At the very end, out of pure pettiness, I did a few more small things. I threw away all of his photos and old keepsakes that were still in Eileen's belongings. Both of his email addresses suddenly started receiving endless streams of spam, ads, and newsletters. His Netflix watch list and viewing history disappeared, and his Twitter account quickly turned into a wall of adult content, random likes, and strange followed accounts. I never told Eileen what I did. I wanted her to have peace and plausible deniability. She only knew about his divorce and his job loss. That was enough for her. If Jeff had only cheated, I probably would have let it go, but he had spent years destroying her psychologically by weaponizing her deepest traumas. That I could never forgive. My £8.50 revenge on a cheating thief. When I was at university, I started dating a guy who, at first, seemed absolutely perfect. He was dedicated to his studies, fun to be around, attentive, and always full of surprises. He worked hard, picked up extra shifts, and seemed responsible and motivated. I genuinely thought I had finally found someone solid. Then, little by little, everything started to fall apart. At first, he began skipping classes. One here, another there. Eventually, he barely showed up at all. At home, he contributed nothing. He didn't wash dishes, clean, do laundry, or cook. Not once. Eventually, he was fired from his job due to too many no-shows. From that point on, his entire life revolved around sitting at home, playing Xbox, and browsing internet forums. This was before social media, so forums were his whole world. All of that came at a cost, and I was the one paying it. To keep us afloat, I took on more and more shifts at work, sometimes double shifts, sometimes triple. I would come home exhausted, clean the apartment, do laundry, and study for exams. Meanwhile, he sat on the couch gaming. Later, I realized this was a pattern for him. Intense motivation at the start, followed by boredom, neglect, and then a new obsession. Over and over again. Deep down, I knew I should have ended the relationship much earlier, but I kept hoping. I told myself it was stress, or a rough patch, or that things would improve after exams. I desperately wanted the man I first fell for to come back. That never happened. One day, I caught him cheating. There was no misunderstanding, no explanation. I caught him red-handed. I kicked him out immediately. I was so exhausted and overwhelmed that it wasn't until the next day that I remembered our joint savings account. There was just over £5,000 in it. Aside from a few £100s from him, all of it was my money. Savings from summer jobs, extra shifts, and careful budgeting. I logged into the account. The balance was 0. In that moment, everything clicked. My ex had drained the account and moved into a new apartment with his side chick. I called the bank, hoping there might be some way to reverse at least part of the transfer. They told me plainly, he was authorized on the account, so he had every right to withdraw the money. From the bank's perspective, nothing improper had happened. I contacted the police. They told me the same thing. Since it was a joint account, no crime had been committed. They suggested civil court, but warned me that legal fees would likely exceed anything I might recover. The reality was simple. He had taken £5,000, and there was almost nothing I could do about it. I felt like a complete fool. What made it worse was seeing his forum posts afterward. He bragged about new consoles, new games, TVs, and gadgets, all purchased with the money I had saved. I'm not usually a vengeful person, occasionally petty maybe, but I had never wanted revenge the way I did in that moment. And unfortunately for him, I knew exactly how to get it. While I was a student, I worked temp jobs during the summers to pay for school. One of those jobs was at a debt collection agency. The work was unpleasant, but it paid well, and I learned a lot about how debt enforcement works. My ex had been avoiding debt for years and was proud of it. He bragged that his debts were nearly statute barred and that he hadn't paid a single penny. In the UK, creditors generally have 6 years to legally enforce a debt. After that, the debt still exists but can no longer be enforced through courts or bailiffs. He was only a few months away from that deadline. What many people don't realize is that making any payment, even a tiny one, resets the clock. One payment starts the 6-year period all over again. I had previously used my knowledge to help him avoid his debts. This time, I used it against him. By the end of our relationship, I handled all the paperwork, including his debts. I knew exactly who he owed and how much. I gathered the documents, took notes, and started calling his creditors one by one. I never pretended to be him. That would have been illegal. I identified myself as someone calling to make a payment on his behalf. They couldn't give me any details, but they could accept payments. I paid the absolute minimum on each debt. Most accepted £1. One required £1.50. In total, I spent £8.50. It was the best £8.50 I've ever spent. During the calls, I also provided his new address, phone number, and his parents' address. I knew they wouldn't update records immediately based on my word alone, but they would note it. Later, when their systems matched his name to those addresses, the records would update. The trap was set. The 6-year clock had restarted. All I had to do was wait. A few months passed. Suddenly, the tone of his forum posts changed. Gone were the bragging posts about gaming PCs. Now there was panic. He wrote about court letters, legal notices, and upcoming hearings. Then he called me, begging for advice. I told him it was no longer my problem. He turned back to the forums. Someone there told him not to attend court, claiming they couldn't proceed without him. That advice was completely wrong. The court date came and went. He didn't show up. Weeks later, he posted photos of his apartment, or rather, what was left of it. Bailiffs had taken everything of value, consoles, computers, TVs, all the items he had bought with my money. That wasn't the end. He received several county court judgments. CCJs can destroy your credit for years. They make it extremely difficult to get credit, rent an apartment, open proper bank accounts, or work in certain industries. Once he was broke and stripped of all his new toys, his side chick left him. I never got my £5,000 back. But seeing everything he bought with stolen money taken away felt incredibly satisfying. I hope it was worth it. And for anyone wondering how a student accumulated 6 years of debt, he started university at 25. He had previously dropped out of another university at 19, worked for a while, then convinced his parents to fund a business degree because he wanted to become an entrepreneur. As for the age gap, I delayed starting university so I could travel. I was 22 when we started dating. He was 26. You learned a lesson too. No joint account unless married. It is too easy to cut and run otherwise, and nothing can be done. This won't stop an account from being cleaned out, but can be brought up in divorce proceedings. Yes, it was a very hard but important lesson. I just wish it hadn't cost me 5,000 pounds. It was my own stupid fault. I took that lesson to heart. Thank you for staying with me until the end. And if you have your own sweet revenge story, be sure to share it in the comments. See you next time.